Hey guys, as we wind down tonight, we enter a world where your spleen could be blamed for your sadness, your nose for your temper, and your womb if you had one for taking unannounced vacations across your body. You're lying in a quiet room, maybe wrapped in a blanket, but if you were living a few centuries ago, that same blanket might have been stuffed with herbs to rebalance your liver's phlegmatic melancholy. And someone nearby would be holding a leech with too much confidence. This is a slow drift through the deeply incorrect, often hilarious, occasionally disturbing history of how people misunderstood their own bodies and what they tried to do about it. You might not survive this one. At least not without losing a little blood or a lot of dignity. So, before you settle in, feel free to give the video a like and hit subscribe if you truly enjoying the journey. You can also leave a comment. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a small wonder to see people tuning in from so many corners of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that gentle hum in the background. And together, let's ease into tonight's story. Let's imagine you wake up one morning in a medieval village with a headache, sore throat, and the vague sense that something inside your chest might be planning a quiet rebellion. In the modern world, you'd call this a cold. Drink some water, maybe take a pill, and wait for Netflix to do the rest. But in the distant past, your symptoms meant something far more dramatic. Your phlegm might be winning a war against your bile. Your black bile might be taking revenge for last week's overly salted fish. Your very soul might be trying to exit through your ears. Welcome to the strange slow-motion chaos of historical medicine. It's a realm where doctors had the confidence of modern surgeons, but the accuracy of weather forecasters guessing wind direction while blindfolded. A world where a headache could mean demons, constipation might offend the gods, and the cure for nearly anything was to remove some blood and hope for the best. You're going to learn about the humors. No, not jokes, though they read just as funny in retrospect. But the 4 temperamental fluids that supposedly governed every twitch and sneeze. You'll meet Galen, the man who thought pigs were good prototypes for human anatomy and accidentally shaped medicine for 1,000 years. And you'll discover the mysterious, highly mobile womb. An organ believed to wander the female body like a curious cat trapped in a haunted house. From blistering treatments to mercury cocktails, from perfumed syringes to gold-infused laxatives, ULL travel through time and into the strange corners of human belief. Corners where logic curled up and cried while someone diagnosed melancholy by sniffing your urine. It's going to be a gentle unraveling of very old, very sincere, very wrong ideas. The kind you only believe when you're terrified, or extremely confident, with no actual evidence. And no matter how bad it sounds, someone somewhere thought it was the best science available. You've been feeling strange lately, a little colder than usual. Food doesn't taste quite right. Your joints creak when you sit, and the village dog has stopped walking near you. That's never a good sign. Someone says you look a bit pale. Another whispers that your humors may be drifting again. You try to shrug it off. But your body disagrees. One morning, you wake with sweat clinging to your chest like wet wool. You try to stand, and the room tilts politely sideways. So congratulations, you're ill. And in the Middle Ages, that's mostly your fault. You may assume it's a simple infection, or the result of spoiled stew. But no, that would be too easy. Your fever is likely caused by sign, pride, or an emotional imbalance triggered by the smell of goose fat on a Thursday. You lie down and wait, not for healing, for judgment. The healer arrives. They don't ask how you're feeling. They don't ask about symptoms. They study your bed linens, sniff your breath, and consult the stars. Then they squint and mutter, "It's the liver, possibly envy." You don't recall feeling envious, but that doesn't matter. Your liver may have done it without asking you first. There's no separation here between the body and the soul. If one fails, the other is held responsible. You're not just ill, you're being examined. Your blanket is too damp. They blame your lack of discipline. Your urine is too cloudy. Clearly your thoughts haven't been pure. Someone suggests you angered a relic by passing it on the wrong side of the road. You're not even sure which relic. But again, it doesn't matter. Your neighbors visit, not to comfort you, but to nod with quiet suspicion. Illness doesn't happen without reason. Maybe you skipped Lent once. Maybe you wore red on a saint's day. Maybe you looked too long at someone else's goat. Someone offers you a boiled onion wrapped in cloth, It's meant to draw out impure thoughts through the soles of your feet. Someone else brings vinegar to sprinkle in the corners of the room to frighten away bad spirits, or attract different ones if those are easier to negotiate with. You nod. You drink the broth. You cough. No one blames the broth. They blame you.
Yes.
Because in this time, illness isn't seen as bad luck. It's seen as consequence.
House.
And not just for your actions, for your feelings. You might have thought bitter thoughts last week. You might have doubted the priest. You might have yawned too loudly during the reading of Psalms. The body remembers. And now, apparently, it's getting revenge. So you lie still, wrapped in too many blankets, breathing like a broken accordion, listening to the healer prepare a poultice made from lard herbs and a philosophy you don't entirely understand. You hope to recover. But more than that, you hope to be forgiven. Because in the Middle Ages, healing isn't just about survival. It's about proving you deserve it. You hear the knock before you see the face. 3 slow taps on the warped wooden door. Not polite, not rushed, just confident. The way someone knocks when they know you can't run. You'd hoped the village healer wouldn't visit. You'd hoped your wheezing and sweating and faint moaning would go unnoticed. You didn't. Now the healer is here, and everything smells like sage and overconfidence. You lie back as they enter. There's no warm greeting, no clipboard, no questions, really. Just a strong sniff in your direction, as if your breath holds the secrets of your liver, and a disapproving glance at your blanket, which they declare too damp for healing. They remove it anyway, exposing your skin to the chill like a slab of meat left out to think about its choices. The healer is carrying a bag. You don't want to know what's in it, but you're going to find out anyway. Out comes a small knife wrapped in linen. A jar of something chunky and ominously green. A dried toad. A wooden spoon carved with what might be runes. Or just careless woodwork. You lose track of the objects, distracted by the sharp, vinegary scent of whatever is now being rubbed on your temples. It smells like mustard, regret, and feet. You want to ask what it's for? You don't? You learned last time that questions lead to more treatments. There's no anesthesia. There's no consent form. There's no "are you allergic to beeswax and powdered bat?" Just a sudden announcement. We'll open the arm. They say it like it's a gentle favor. A bowl is produced. A vein is located. And in goes the knife, with a delicate jab that suggests this person trims their candle wicks with surgical precision. Blood starts to flow reluctantly at first, then with an almost enthusiastic exit, you stare at the ceiling and try not to pass out. It doesn't help that your healer starts humming. As the bowl fills, the healer mutters things about heat, moisture, and the dryness of your soul. Apparently your humors are still behaving like they're in a bar brawl, and only bloodletting will referee. You're not sure how much blood is too much blood. You suspect they don't know either. The bowl is about half full when they finally nod and tie off your arm with a linen strip that smells faintly of wet dog. But it's not over. Now comes the blistering. Hot metal pokers are retrieved from the hearth. You pray there for decoration. They're not. One is placed gently, too gently on your lower back. The sizzle makes you yelp, which is noted as a good sign. Means the demons are resisting, the healer says, as if this is normal. As if this is science. You endure. You leak. You feel a bit like a bread roll that someone keeps poking with forks and calling medicinal. Eventually, the healer stands back, pleased. You're left with a bruised arm, a throbbing burn, a strong smell of herbs and iron, and exactly 0 improvement. They'll be back tomorrow. You're hungry. That's the first mistake. You had assumed, perhaps foolishly, that being ill might earn you a warm bowl of broth, maybe some soft bread, a comforting gesture in food form. Instead, someone hands you a wooden dish containing what looks like boiled weeds and insists it is a purifying tonic.
You take a bite.
It tastes like betrayal, pond water, and punishment. They call it gruel. But it's not the cozy, Dickensian gruel you've heard about in bedtime stories. This is thinner than water, thicker than despair, and flavored with something that might once have been a leek, or just a convincing impersonator. It's warm, technically, but in the way dishwater gets warm when left too close to the hearth. You chew, you regret, you swallow. Apparently solid food is off limits. Too provocative for the gut, they say. As though your intestines are scandalized debutantes who might faint at the sight of a lentil, meat is forbidden. Dairy is dangerous. Fruit is confusing. Your diet now consists of liquids that whisper quietly as they pass through your body, hoping not to disturb the internal drama of your humors. You ask for honey. Honey is good for sore throats, right? Wrong. Honey is heating, and your bile is already heated, or cold, or confused. Either way, no honey. Maybe a radish. Radishes are safe. Sometimes, if the moon agrees, a neighbor arrives with sympathy and something wrapped in cloth, a small offering. You unwrap it. It's a roasted onion, half burned and still steaming. The smell is overwhelming, like a foot that learned to sing. You're told to inhale deeply. It clears the humors, they say. You're restarting to suspect that clearing the humors is just a medieval euphemism for suffering creatively. You try sipping water? Bad move. Water is suspicious. If it hasn't been blessed, boiled, or laced with herbs, it's practically considered a liquid demon. So instead, you're offered a cup of warm ale with mustard seeds floating in it like tiny, angry buoys. It burns your throat, waters your eyes, and makes you cough so hard your ribs file a formal complaint. The healer nods approvingly. Loosening the phlegm, they say, as though that was your life goal. You lie back, stomach rumbling, tongue coated in the ghost of 10 herbs that should never have met each other, and a mysterious paste now being applied to your temples. It smells like vinegar, old cheese, and optimism. Dinner arrives. It's the same as breakfast and lunch. A thin broth now slightly congealed, with a floating object you choose not to investigate. You sip. You sigh. You consider whether this is all just a clever way to starve demons out of your body. If so, it's working. The demons are probably already halfway to another village. You haven't tasted salt in 3 days. You haven't seen anything chewable in 2. Your teeth are starting to feel abandoned, like soldiers stationed at a peaceful border no one's crossed in years. You try to remember what bread tastes like. You fail. You wake up coughing. Again, the good news is you're still alive. The bad news is someone S walking toward you with a box of hot coals and something that looks suspiciously like a dried hedgehog. They've decided it's time for a stronger remedy. So far, the healing process has involved boiled roots, unsolicited bleeding, and being yelled at by your aunt for sneezing near the salted pork. But now it's escalated. Now you're a candidate for cupping, a practice which, despite sounding gentle, involves heating. Glass or horn cups and placing them on your bare back until they suction your skin into polite little volcanoes of pain. This will draw out the toxins, they say, while burning your shoulder with what feels like aggressive ambition. You lie there, dotted with cups like some kind of sick medieval turtle, wondering if this is really about health, or if someone is just experimenting with your body like it's a confused sausage. One cup slips. A loud hiss. You flinch. Good, they say. Means it's working. Eventually, the cups are removed. You now look like someone tried to map the stars on your back using bruises. You're retold not to bathe. Not that you had plans, because water might reverse the healing, or anger your spleen, or attract bad spirits. It's unclear. You ask about rest. Rest is important, right? They nod. Then prescribe a foot bath in wine with garlic while reciting the Psalms. Because healing, apparently, is a multi-sensory experience that smells like a medieval salad dressing. Next comes the blistering. You thought that was a one-time horror? No, it's back. A new area is selected. Your ankle this time. You're informed it's directly linked to your lungs. That logic is held together by the ancient principle of because someone important once said so. A coin-sized blister blooms. Clench your teeth. The healer applies a balm made from beeswax, pig fat, and hope. It doesn't help, but it does make the cat suspiciously interested in your leg. You're told to remain cheerful. Positive thoughts expel illness, so you smile, a strained grimace that fools no one, and try to be grateful. You haven't yet been prescribed powdered emeralds. Those are expensive, not refundable. You also encouraged to wear a charm, a small pouch of herbs, and something that might be dried lizard foot, tied around your neck with twine. For protection, they say. From what exactly is vague, but you wear it. Because by now, you've surrendered. You are no longer a person. You are a reluctant experiment in pain tolerance and superstition. The next morning, someone suggests trepanning. You laugh. They don't. Apparently, boring a hole in your skull to let the bad humors out isn't a joke. It's an option. One you might face if things get worse. Or if your neighbors get bored. You curl deeper into your straw mattress. The coals have gone out. The ointments have dried. You smell like burnt garlic and last night's fear. And still your cough remains. Loud, persistent, undeterred. They call that progress. You thought being sick might earn you some peace and quiet. You were wrong. There's no rest in bed rest. At least not when your bed is located in a one-room cottage with 7 other people. 2 chickens, 1 goat, and a toddler who's convinced your face is a climbing wall. You're meant to be healing, but instead, you're hosting a festival of noise, smells, and unsolicited advice. Your bed is technically yours. You sleep in it most nights. But now that you're sick, it has become a public space, like a medieval lounge, just with more sneezing. Your grandmother sits at the foot, mending a sock that's mostly holes. A cousin nearby is shelling beans loudly. Someone else is boiling cabbage too close to your head. The entire room smells like wet wool, boiled brassica, and faint panic. Every so often, someone peers at you with grave concern. You still look pale, they say, as if you could just decide to be pinker. One neighbor insists on holding your hand and humming. Another thinks laughter is healing and begins telling a story about a dancing monk and a goat. You wish for silence. You get interpretive goat noises. Privacy is not an option. Even the goat is staring. You try to close your eyes to drift away, but just as sleep creeps near, the door creaks open. A friend has arrived, carrying soup. It's lukewarm. It smells like regret. They insist on feeding it to you, spoon by spoon, as if you've lost all hand coordination. You chew dutifully. Tastes like every other bowl of illness soup, vague, vegetal, and seasoned mostly with obligation. Later, your healer returns. Again, and decides your bed is too soft. It's making your spleen lazy. They suggest moving you to a bench by the hearth. You are relocated like a mildly disappointing loaf of bread. The bench is hard, the fire too hot, and someone's feet are very close to your nose. But at least the goat can't reach you here. A child comes over and pokes your blistered leg. You yelp. The child giggles. This, apparently, is entertainment now. You try to assert boundaries. You request a moment alone. The room goes quiet. Then someone says, "They're hallucinating. This must be the fever." You are given more broth. At night, things don't improve. Everyone sleeps in the same room, bundled in straw, old cloaks, and whatever warmth can be stolen from livestock. The goat farts. Someone snores like a blacksmith hammering an anvil. You lie awake, wondering if the bubbling near your ear is soup or phlegm. You cough once. Instantly, a dozen remedies are offered. Onion poultices, prayers, a warm turnip under the armpit. You are a group project now, a community illness. Eventually, you stop resisting. You lean back against the wooden wall, scratchy and cold, and accept your fate. There's no solitude, no quiet, no dignity. There is only cabbage and the goat. Always the goat. You didn't think this would become a spiritual matter? You thought you were just ill. A little fever, some coughing, possibly a mystery rash that looks like a map of France. But now Father Bernard is standing at your bedside, holding a candle, a flask of holy water, and the kind of expression usually reserved for funerals or heretics. Your aunt invited him. She believes your condition is no longer just physical, it's metaphysical, possibly moral, probably your fault. Father Bernard begins with a prayer, loudly. In Latin, you understand none of it, but the rhythm alone makes your fever spike. Then comes the holy water, sprinkled with alarming enthusiasm. A few drops hit your face. One lands directly in your open mouth. It tastes like dust and repentance. You try to sit up, presses a hand to your forehead and declares it unrighteously warm. This, apparently, is cause for concern. You were asked when you last confessed. You try to remember. Last Lent? The Lent before that? You say recently. He looks unconvinced. A list of possible sins is offered. Coveting goats, skipping mass, thinking envious thoughts about the baker's wife's biscuits. You nod at random. Confession, it seems, is part of the healing process now. After the confession comes the inspection of your room. Father Bernard circles slowly, noting your herbal charms, your healing stones, the carved idol someone gave you for fertility 5 years ago and you forgot to hide. He pauses, raises an eyebrow. You are given a gentle but firm reminder about idolatry. The idol is removed, the soup is reblessed, the goat sneezes. Next comes the relic. Not your relic. The church's. Father Bernard produces a small wooden box wrapped in velvet and solemnity. Inside is allegedly a splinter of a saint's fingerbone, preserved for miracles and occasions like this. He places it on your forehead. It's cool, oddly comforting, and smells faintly of beeswax and expectations. A prayer is whispered. A chant is hummed. Someone in the corner weeps. You think they're just cutting onions, but it adds drama. The diagnosis is clear. Your body is not just sick. Your soul is imbalanced. The treatment, prayer, fasting, and possibly a pilgrimage. You are barely strong enough to walk to the chamber pot, but a pilgrimage, sure, that makes sense. You nod. It's easier than arguing. Father Bernard finally leaves, promising to return tomorrow with more relics. Possibly a piece of St. Agatha's sandal. You're not sure what part of the body that helps, but at this point you'll take anything. You lie back. The room smells like incense and reheated stew. Your head aches from the chanting. Your chest wheezes like a haunted bellows. Outside, the church bells ring the hour, a reminder that time is passing, slowly like honey through winter. You cough again. Somewhere a neighbor crosses themselves. Apparently you're still alive, but now you have to be holy about it. You are handed a small clay cup. It's warm, slightly sticky, and smells like burnt mint, sulfur, in someone's basement. The healer smiles encouragingly, which is never a good sign. This will settle your stomach, they say. You take a cautious sip. It tastes like metal, mold, and deep regret. You immediately want to spit it out, but someone is watching, so you swallow and pretend your eyes aren't watering. Your stomach responds by doing a slow somersault. Settled is not the word you'd use. They tell you it's a tonic. It's a mixture of vinegar, honey, ground snail shells, and a pinch of something called powder of crushed emerald. You ask if it's safe. The answer is a shrug. It worked once. There's no pharmacy. There's no expiration date. Medicine in the Middle Ages is a bold mix of kitchen logic, wild guesses, and medieval peer pressure. If it exists, someone has tried to eat it, or boil it, or rub it directly on a wound. You're given another remedy. A black paste, applied to your chest with the enthusiasm of someone buttering bread. You ask what's in it. They answer. Soot, goose fat, and a touch of dried rose petals. Because apparently, even internal combustion requires a floral note. Then comes the purgative, a bitter syrup designed to cleanse. It's the term everyone uses. Cleanse. As though your insides are just dusty shelves waiting to be polished. In reality, this syrup contains castor oil, ash bark, and something that once moved. It works quickly, too quickly. Your chamber pot becomes your closest companion. You thank it. You apologize to it. You begin to miss the days when your ailments stayed politely above the waist. You beg for water. Instead, they bring you a mixture of mead and warm milk, because hydration must never be simple. It curdles on the way down. You curl up and reconsider all your life choices, including your decision to not pretend to be dead last week when the healer first knocked. Someone suggests a poultice for your headache. You agree weakly? The poultice is made of breadcrumbs, vinegar, crushed garlic, and for reasons unexplained, mashed frog. It smells like an insult. You lie still while it bakes gently against your forehead, doing absolutely nothing except attract flies. Every medicine comes with a story. This cured my uncle's boils. This saved a monk during the plague. This might have worked once in Spain. None of these are encouraging. Eventually, you're handed a final dose. A powdered preparation wrapped in a scrap of cloth. You open it, it's glittery. That's never good. You're told it includes crushed pearl, deer antler, and a feather from a bird that never lands. You look up, surely this is a joke. It is not. You swallow it anyway. Because at this point, your standards are as low as your pulse. You're trying to rest. Or at least lie still without dislodging your poultice, which has begun to leak slightly and now smells like garlic arguing with mildew. But rest is not part of the neighborhood's plan. The door creaks open again. It's not the healer this time. It's your neighbor, Alfreda. She carries no herbs, no relics, no formal medical training. What she brings instead is certainty. The dangerous kind. I knew someone who had your symptoms, she announces. They died. Comforting. She sits beside your bed without being invited and begins listing remedies. Most involve butter or prayers. Or butter and prayers. Her favorite is wrapping your feet in onions and whispering psalms in reverse. You don't ask why the onions need to be reversed. That way lies madness. Moments later, another neighbor appears. This one believes in cold treatments, cold everything, cold compresses, cold air, cold stairs. Open a window, he says. Let the bad spirits out. You'd point out that the air outside smells like manure and sorrow, but your mouth is currently coated in powdered pearl. A third neighbor chimes in from the doorway. Leeches, she says, but not just any leeches. Churchyard leeches. These, apparently, have a better track record. Sanctified blood-sucking. You nod faintly. You've given up saying no. It only prolongs the monologue. The room begins to swell with people. Neighbors, cousins, one confused baker's apprentice who heard there might be soup. Everyone has a theory. Everyone wants to touch your forehead. No one has washed their hands. One man tells you your sickness comes from envy. His evidence, he once saw you eyeing his cow. You try to speak, you croak. A cloth is shoved into your hand. Chew this, someone instructs. It's soaked in vinegar and goose breath. You chew. You regret. You briefly forget your own name. Someone starts debating your prognosis. In front of you, 3 days, says one. A week, says another. They're tough. Maybe 2, says someone optimistically while poking your foot. You're no longer a person. You're a shared curiosity. A community riddle. A canvas upon which the entire village is now painting their unsolicited wisdom. Then come the rumors. Witchcraft, someone whispers. I heard they read by candlelight on a Sunday. You blink slowly. You want to protest. You want to clarify that it was a calendar, not a grimoire, and that the goat knocked it over. But it's too late. The idea has legs. And a tail. You sneeze. The room gasps. Someone begins reciting verses. Another starts looking for salt. You're unsure if it's to purify the air or season you for the afterlife. Eventually, mercifully, they trickle out. One leaves a loaf of bread. One leaves a small wooden carving of a saint that's missing an arm. Everyone leaves their opinions behind, like a trail of unhelpful breadcrumbs. You lie back, exhausted, bewildered, and faintly salted. The goat returns. It also has opinions. You've survived the bleeding, the blistering, the cabbage steamings, the goose fat rubs, and the opinionated goat. You're still breathing, which is now being taken as proof. Not of resilience, but of divine favor. God has spared you, someone says, eyes wide with admiration and fear, as though you personally negotiated your lungs back from heaven. You try to smile, but your lips are dry, cracked, and still faintly sticky from the honey leech poultice. Someone insisted on applying just in case. You murmur something resembling thanks, but the truth is, you're not sure if you're recovering or just adjusting. And here's the catch. In the Middle Ages, recovery is rarely credited to the treatments, and never to your immune system. If you improve, it's divine intervention. A miracle. A sign that the saints are watching. Possibly that relic Father Bernard left under your bed is finally doing its job. People start whispering. Some say it's because your soul is especially pure. Others suspect you've been quietly bribing the Virgin Mary with turnips. One person insists it's the crushed emerald tonic. You know it's not. That potion made your ears ring for 2 days and convinced you the goat could speak Latin. But if you don't get better, if your cough deepens, if the rash spreads, if you stop sitting up during the broth hour, the tone changes. You weren't pious enough. You doubted the poultice. You complained too loudly about the sacred garlic. Suddenly your suffering becomes your own fault. You weren't grateful enough for the vinegar foot bath. You didn't lean into the discomfort with sufficient humility. You didn't grovel while receiving your powdered toad. Worse, you might be accused of resisting the healing, not physically, spiritually. Maybe you've been harboring sinful thoughts. Maybe that flirtation with the candlemaker's apprentice 3 harvests ago is finally catching up to you. Illness, after all, is moral decay with a fever. You're now watched closely, not just for symptoms, but for signs. Do you weep when prayed over? Do you flinch at the relic? Did the holy water sizzle? People start remembering things. You once skipped Lent. You sneezed during Mass. You wore red too confidently last winter. The line between patient and problem becomes very thin. And if you worsen, if your breath rattles, or your eyes roll back, or you simply look too pale in candlelight, plans begin. Quiet ones. For confession, for burial, maybe even a discreet conversation about demonic possession, just in case.
Just in case?
But if you keep living, against the odds, against the tonics, against the goat's growing judgment, then you are declared blessed. It's not lucky, not tough. It's not constitutionally sound. Blessed. You're expected to show gratitude now, publicly, a donation to the church, an offering to the shrine. Maybe a pilgrimage, if you can walk again. You've been spared, after all. That comes with strings. You thank the saints. You avoid making eye contact with the healer, who's already rummaging for more powdered pearl just in case. You're not healed. You've just survived enough to be useful again. There's sick, and then there's sick. You've endured coughs, fevers, poultices that smell like fermented laundry, and enough goat-related commentary to last a lifetime. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepares you for the moment someone says the word plague. It doesn't even have to be confirmed. Just whispered, just suspected. It's enough to clear a street faster than fire. Suddenly your fever isn't just your problem, it's everyone's. You're no longer a patient. You're a potential omen, a walking curse, a reason to burn all your belongings and consider moving to a cave. And the symptoms? Well, they're dramatic. Buboes, swellings the size of goose eggs, popping up in places you didn't know you had lymph nodes. They arrive fast, angry, and full of secrets. There's no slow descent, no gradual decline. You're fine, and then you're not. It's like your body flips a switch labeled exit now. The healer doesn't come this time. Too risky. Instead, they send someone younger, disposable. Usually an apprentice holding a stick. A charm and an expression that says, "I didn't sign up for this." They don't enter. They shout from the doorway. You're advised to pray, to purge, to prepare your soul. You ask if there's a cure. They laugh. There are treatments, technically. None of them work, but they do exist. You may be offered dried toad powder, applied generously to your buboes. Or you might be bled again, because clearly, if it didn't help the first 6 times, the 7th must be lucky. Someone might even suggest sitting in a room full of crushed roses, because floral suffering is more elegant. Some cities light incense in the streets. Others recommend rubbing onions on your chest while fasting and reciting psalms. In some places, they whip themselves in public, hoping their pain will persuade God to stop sending rats. Meanwhile, you are quarantined. Not in a modern, quiet, Netflix and tissues kind of way. No, you're sealed in your home, literally. Boards nailed over the door. A painted red mark beside it. 8. A bowl of food left outside like you're a slightly cursed stray. Inside, your world shrinks. The walls grow closer. The air thickens. The goat refuses to come near you now. Smart goat. Your neighbors cross themselves when they pass your window. Children throw stones at your house and run away. You're not mad. You would too. Time blurs. You alternate between fevered dreams and sweating through your only decent tunic. You pray. Not for survival, but for something faster than this. Something quiet. Gentle. Not the constant groan of bones and the fear that your skin might split open like overcooked barley. If you recover, you will be watched. If you don't, your house may be burned. Just in case no one wants to touch your body, the town has rules for that. A rope, a cart, a field. And yet somehow, some people do survive. You've heard of them? The ones who live, who walk again, who cough once more in public and are not chased. They are not heroes. They are just lucky, which in the Middle Ages is the rarest medicine of all. Let's say you're sick. Again. Because of course you are. Your lungs feel like damp wool. Your stomach is making quiet threats, and someone has told you to seek out the wisdom of the ancients. That wisdom. It begins with a man named Galen. He was Roman. He was confident. He was wrong. Gloriously, enduringly wrong. But unfortunately for you, he was also very persuasive. For over 1,000 years, Galen's theories shaped the way medicine was taught, practiced, and misunderstood. which means the next thing going into your body is based on something. A man wrote down while poking a pig. Literally. Galen loved animal dissection. Human cadavers were often illegal or frowned upon, so he made assumptions. Good ones. He once examined an ape and decided your kidneys floated. He saw a goat's liver and declared yours had 5 lobes. Close enough, right? Now you, poor patient, are lying on a wooden table while someone trained in Galenic. Medicine debates whether your black bile is melancholic enough to explain why you're retired. They consult scrolls. They mutter Latin. They draw diagrams in chalk that look like treasure maps for sadness. You ask if the problem might be something simple, like food poisoning. They nod solemnly. Ah, yes, they say. An excess of cold phlegm dampening the vital heat of your inner organs. You are then prescribed a mix of boiled beetroot, goat's milk, and something called cleansing salt. You drink it. Your body files a protest. If your cough worsens, the treatment escalates. Not based on your symptoms, but on Galen's writings. Your healer references a section written around the year 170 CE, which describes how hot. Dry diseases must be treated with cool, moist remedies. They hand you a cucumber soaked in vinegar. You eat it, you regret it. The vinegar reminds your throat that you haven't forgiven it for yesterday's leeching. You try to protest. You're told Galen understood the body as a balance of humors. For fluids, each tied to elements, seasons, temperaments, and possibly breakfast choices. If you're too choleric, you're spicy and impatient. If you're phlegmatic, you're sluggish and damp. Every treatment flows from this model. Fortunately, the model is wrong. Galen thought the heart had 3 chambers. It has 4. He thought blood formed in the liver and ebbed back and forth like a tide. It doesn't. He believed the brain cooled the blood. Your skull, according to Galen, was essentially a radiator. And still, people believed him for centuries. Because he wrote a lot, he sounded certain. And, let's be honest, nobody had anything better. His books were copied, quoted, and argued about like they were sacred texts. Which means that even now, in your humble, flea-ridden village, you're sipping pig liver tea because Galen misinterpreted an ape spleen. You lie back. You exhale. You feel no better, but your healer smiles. Galen would be proud. That's not comforting. You decide to pursue medicine. Or, rather, someone decides for you. Maybe your uncle is a healer. Maybe your monastery needs a physician. Maybe you lost a bet. Either way, congratulations. You're now a medieval medical student. You pack your things, 2 tunics, a dried ink stick, a slightly judgmental quill, and your most important item, a copy of Galen's works. Not the full set, of course. That would require 3 donkeys and a wagon, just the essentials. 100,000 words or so passed down, copied by candlelight, and annotated in the margins by people who sneezed on the parchment. You arrive at your school. It smells like wax, sweat, and warm vellum. You find a seat on a hard bench in a cold hall and prepare for your first lesson. The professor enters. He doesn't look at you. He looks at the book. He begins reading Galen. Slowly, reverently, as if the words themselves might cure illness. You try to take notes? You write. Black bile rises in autumn. Phlegm enjoys the moonlight. You're not sure what it means. You nod anyway. There is no dissecting table, no practical demonstrations, just long recitations and longer debates. 2 men spend an entire afternoon arguing whether sadness originates in the spleen or the liver. No one asks a patient. Patients don't attend lectures, you suggest cautiously, that perhaps the spleen is more complex than Galen described. The room goes silent. Someone drops a spoon. A pigeon coos in warning. Your professor sighs. You doubt Galen? Consider your answer carefully. The last student who doubted Galen was assigned a year-long study of bile. You shake your head. I was only clarifying. The professor nods slowly. You are forgiven. For now. Psst. Instead, you learn to memorize. Every treatment must align with the ancient texts. Fever, hot and dry. Treat with cucumbers and damp socks. Melancholy, cold and dry. Warm bread and loud music. Broken leg. Balance the humors. Preferably with nettle tea and a stern lecture. Anatomy lessons are rare and mostly theoretical. You are shown wax models, poorly preserved bones, and once, a taxidermied badger dressed like a bishop. It's unclear what lesson that was supposed to teach. You are taught to diagnose by examining urine. Color, clarity, even taste. Yes, taste. You swirl it in a glass. Hold it to the light and pretend not to gag. One day, you will have to do this in front of a nobleman. It will be your moment of glory. Or exile. Eventually, you pass your exam. It consists of reciting Galen, nodding at Galen, and promising never to contradict Galen. You are now a physician. You still don't know how most organs work, but you know the correct herbs to chew during a lunar eclipse. You graduate. You receive a robe, a certificate, and a stern warning. Trust Galen. Question nothing. Avoid frogs. You are ready to misdiagnose hundreds of people with absolute confidence. You've just been handed a knife, a dead pig, a lot of expectations. You were hoping for a human body, or at least a diagram that looked vaguely accurate. But this is what Galen used. And since Galen is your guiding light, you too shall. Slice open a pig and pretend it's a person. The pig does not resemble a person, not even a little, but you do your best. You press the blade into the belly, peel back layers. Try not to flinch at the smell. A combination of raw meat, cold iron, and the quiet shame of guessing. Your instructor peers over your shoulder. This, he says confidently, pointing, to a glistening blob is the spleen. It is not. You nod anyway. Animal dissection is as close as you'll get to anatomy. Human bodies are sacred, forbidden, or already rotting in ways that make them unusable. So instead, you examine pigs, monkeys, and goats, then extrapolate. Pig's liver becomes your blueprint. A monkey's brain becomes your model. You are assembling the human body like a puzzle, using pieces from 3 different boxes. You slice further. Veins spill like lazy ribbons. The organs glisten, twitch, and defy identification. Your instructor declares that blood is created in the liver, pumped into the veins by invisible forces, pulled back in tides like the sea, but grosser. You ask why hearts beat? He replies, warmth. You ask what nerves are, says threads of soul. You stop asking. Instead, you observe and guess, and write down what Galen said, even when what you're seeing disagrees. You see 1 kidney? Galen says 2. You see a single liver lobe. Galen says 5. You close the pig and write 5. It's easier that way. One student argues that he saw something different. He is removed from the class, not for being wrong, for being disruptive. And so, the dissection continues. You learn that the brain is full of spirit vapor, that bones are infused with vital heat, and that the intestines are selfish and lazy. These are not jokes. These are accepted truths. You learn to sketch what's expected, not what's real. Your drawings become religious icons, not accurate, but revered. You ink each organ carefully, adding flourishes to make them look busy, mysterious, purposeful. You present them to your teacher. He nods. Very Galenic. You're praised. You feel proud and deeply confused. Eventually, the pig is discarded. You wipe your hands on a cloth that used to be white. You smell like biology and disappointment. You try to remember what you learned. You remember guesses, confident guesses, elegant guesses. Centuries of guesses passed down like heirlooms. The human body remains a mystery, but the pig? You've made peace with the pig. Asterisk, you've graduated. You have a robe, a book full of Galen's wisdom, and a client with a mysterious pain in his side. You nod solemnly, press your fingers against his ribs like you're listening for gossip, and announce, "Ah, the black bile is restless." It sounds impressive. It means nothing. Still, your patient believes you. After all, you're wearing linen. You have a scroll. You use Latin words and say things like congestion of melancholic, residue. He nods, terrified. You prescribe 3 things: nettle tea, a purge, and a strict diet of cold porridge and abstinence from what you don't specify. It's safer that way. The key to being a Galenic physician is tone, confidence, a kind of professional shrug, cloaked in vocabulary. You do not wonder aloud. You declare, no diagnosis is complete without at least 2 metaphors and 1 reference to the moon. If the treatment doesn't work, And it won't? You say it's because the humors were too imbalanced or not imbalanced enough. You adjust the ratios. You prescribe more porridge. The cycle continues. One patient comes to you with burning eyes. You say, excessive choler, too much heat, too much dryness. You prescribe cold cucumbers, pressed directly onto the face, and a soothing drink made of barley water and ground snail shell. She returns days later. The redness has spread. You double the dose. Another arrives with bloating, fears it's worms. You say, wind trapped in the spleen. Prescribe cloves, fasting, and a stern conversation with his stomach. He does not improve. You suggest maybe the wind is moral? A third patient is clearly dying. Purple blotches, shallow breath, smell. Like the end of hope. You open Galen's book, flip past the cheerful diagrams of bile, and land on a section about sudden decay of spirits. You prescribe hot wine, a leech, and a prayer. The leech dies. You try again. This time, the leech clings longer. As a sign, the patient dies. You take that as a lesson about timing. You never blame yourself. You can't. Galen is the source. If Galen is wrong, then the foundation of medicine, your training, your robes, your entire sense of purpose, starts to wobble like undercooked pudding. So you double down. You diagnose faster, speak louder, add more nettles. Sometimes a patient does get better. It's luck, or time, or sheer stubborn anatomy. But you take full credit. You cite a rare passage from Galen. You recommend the same treatment to the next 5 people. It fails every time. Still you nod. The treatment was correct. You say the patient was not. This is how Galen survives, not by results, but by reverence. No matter what happens, he is right. Even if someone dies, even if everyone dies, you sleep well. Because you followed the method, and you've prescribed. Porridge again, asterisk. You begin to notice something unsettling. Not all patients follow the rules. You prescribed nettle soup for melancholy. It got worse. You assigned mustard baths for lethargy. They fainted. One person followed the complete regimen for balancing phlegm and began to hallucinate a choir of tiny saints. Criticizing his haircut, you start to wonder, but then you remember, Galen cannot be wrong. So clearly the problem is the patient, or the stars, or the ratio of bile to moral clarity. Maybe they didn't chew the right number of times. Maybe the moon was in the wrong mood. Keep a chart for such occasions. It tells you nothing. But it looks authoritative. Then, something radical happens. You meet a midwife. She is old, unimpressed by robes, and carries her herbs in a cloth satchel that smells like vinegar and bruised thyme. She treats wounds with boiled linen and poultices made of things that grow near her door. Her patients get better, not always, but enough to be suspicious. You ask her what texts she follows. She snorts. Texts. I follow infection. You blink. That word doesn't exist in Galen's scrolls. Consider correcting her. But her stare is sharp enough to lance a boil. One day, she shows you how to clean a wound. Not with honey and Latin incantations, but with water. Just water. Warm, clean, simple. You watch it wash away the blood, the pus, the guesswork. Wound breathes. You feel betrayed. Later, you try to fit this into Galen's framework. You declare the water a neutral element, aiding humoral circulation. You write it in your book with extra flourishes. If Galen never mentioned it, maybe he meant to. Still, the doubts grow. You read his descriptions of organs. The ones you've seen in pigs or people when no one was looking, they don't match. The shapes are wrong. The positions are weird. The connections are fictional. According to Galen, the liver does everything except write poetry. You wonder how much he guessed. You suspect the answer is most of it. But you also know that to reject Galen is to untie your entire profession. Without him, medicine becomes what it truly is, a fog, a guess, a panic in a robe. So you do what generations before you have. Done, you compromise. You say the patient's humors are wrong, but maybe. Also, there's a local spirit in their kneecap. You prescribe nettle oil and a cloth boiled in thyme like the midwife taught. You read Galen by day.
Nice.
You learn from the midwife by night. You become two doctors in one skin. Publicly, you speak of bile and balance and sacred heat. Privately, you wash wounds, boil water, and quietly whisper apologies to your own liver for years of mistreatment. You still wear the robe. You still nod confidently. But sometimes, when no one is watching, you open your book and write a new note in the margins. Maybe Galen didn't know everything. And then you hide it, because even now you're not ready to let go of the illusion completely. Not yet. Asterisk, asterisk. You're still clutching Galen's book like it's the only thing keeping your career afloat. Then the Renaissance happens, slowly at first, like a sunrise made of doubt. People start reading, not just memorizing, but reading, comparing, questioning. Dangerous verbs. A man named Vesalius enters the scene, and he is not impressed. He gets his hands on actual human bodies, a scandal, a miracle, a logistical nightmare. Dia. He peels back the skin, pokes around, and discovers what you feared. For years, Galen was wrong about pretty much everything inside you. He publishes De Humani Corpus Fabrica, a book with pictures, real pictures. Organs drawn where they actually are, not just where a confused Roman thought they felt right. It's the anatomical equivalent of someone pointing out that your house has no roof and the stairs go nowhere. You see the book, you stare at the diagrams. They're beautiful, detailed, alarming. The veins don't loop. The heart isn't a steam engine. The liver isn't a philosopher. You close the book quickly and whisper an apology to Galen, just in case. But it's out now. The truth. You can't unsee it. At first, no one wants to talk about it. Too disruptive, too new, too accurate. Some physicians say Vesalius is dangerous. Others say he's just ... annoying. There's something very inconvenient about a man who disproves your entire education in one elegantly inked page. You consider ignoring it. But your next patient has a strange lump. Galen says it's misplaced. Bile? Vesalius says it's a hernia. You're not sure who to believe, but one of them drew it with shading, and that feels like science. The shift is slow. Some doctors tear up their Galen texts. Others pretend nothing's changed. You try a compromise. You keep Galen on your shelf, but now he shares it with Vesalius. They don't get along. You still use Galen's vocabulary. It keeps patients calm, but you begin adjusting treatments. You clean wounds more often. You question whether every fever needs to be bled. You quietly stop prescribing ground pearl. You never admit it publicly. That would be professional suicide. But in back rooms and whispered corners, you and other, physicians start calling Galen's work outdated. Not wrong, of course. It's just written in a different time, for a different kind of body. Still, the tide is turning. University lectures include corrections. New texts are written. The printing press helps. Now, mistakes can be distributed faster than ever, and yet Galen lingers, not because he's right, but because he's familiar. Comfortable. It's like a coat that doesn't fit anymore, but still smells like home. You leaf through his book one night, the pages soft from use. You smile at his confidence, his metaphors, his fondness for goats. You respect him, even if his anatomy was part fiction, part pig, part optimistic guesswork. He was wrong, but he made you ask questions. And sometimes, in medicine, that's the beginning of everything. Asterisk, you wake up in the modern world. There's a thermometer in your mouth, a blood pressure cuff on your arm, and a nurse who doesn't believe in evil spirits. Everything smells like disinfectant and insurance paperwork. It's all so ... advance. And yet, somehow, Galen is still here. Not in the tools, maybe, not in the charts or the beeping machines, but in the thinking. In the lingering ideas about balance, temperaments, and the bizarre desire to explain all of human behavior using body fluids. You glance at a wellness blog. It mentions detoxing your liver. Galen smiles faintly from the grave. A fitness. Guru recommends eating warm foods in winter to align with your inner heat. Galen nods from his amphora. Someone insists that moods are tied to gut health. And while they don't mention bile specifically, in your bones and maybe your spleen that Galen would approve, he never truly left. His 4 temperaments were absorbed into psychology, renamed, repackaged, and placed in neat personality quizzes. Are you a melancholic introvert with a penchant for rain-soaked poetry? Congratulations, Galen's ghost just gave you a little nod of recognition. Even modern diagnoses flirt with his logic. Hormonal imbalances, mood cycles, the way we talk about hot heads and cold shoulders, echoes of a man who thought sadness seeped out of the spleen like poorly aged wine. Some practitioners still bleed patients just now. They call it cupping and charge more. You can still find powdered pearl and high-end skincare, okay? And herbal teas to balance your energy. Galen again, hiding in a box of chamomile with a price tag and a QR code. Doctors today are trained in evidence, trial, and peer review. But walk into a hospital with an unexplained symptom. And sometimes, just sometimes, the diagnosis still starts with a shrug and ends with a guess. The language is cleaner now. But the uncertainty, that's eternal. Even the modern obsession. With balanced diets, balanced hormones, balanced moods, feels suspiciously galenic. We no longer call it black bile, but we still want to name our discomfort, pin it to something. Box it up neatly with instructions and side effects. And there's still comfort in a system that claims to understand you completely even. If it's wrong, that's what Galen offered. A map, a theory, system. He was wrong about the roads, the landmarks, and possibly the compass, but it felt like you could navigate life with it. It was hard to let go of. So next time someone offers you a ginger tonic to calm your anxious fire energy, smile. You're in a long tradition of guessing with confidence. Asterisk. You open a book. It's Galen again, but this time it's in Latin. Last week it was Greek. Next week it might be Arabic. No one's sure anymore what the original said, but everyone agrees it was brilliant, even when no one understands. You read the sentence. Sanguinis excessus naturam calidam interimit si non temperatur. You squint. That could mean an excess of blood interrupts the body's heat, or too much blood makes you die screaming. You go with the polite version. Your patients appreciate subtlety. The problem is, Galen never wrote for clarity. He wrote like a man trying to impress his ancestors. Every paragraph is dense, every sentence a parade of metaphors, every footnote a philosophical argument about whether phlegm can sin. You're not the only one struggling at the university. 3 scholars are debating whether melancholia means sadness, constipation, or political disobedience. 1 insists it's all. 3. Another says it depends on lunar alignment. The third has fallen asleep into his manuscript, drooling gently across the margin of a passage. It's about spleen vapors. The arguments are constant, heated, completely circular, because the real battle isn't about meaning, it's about authority. Each copy of Galen's work has a slightly different flavor. Thanks to monks with creative liberties and scribes with bad handwriting. One edition says, blood boils when angry. Another says, blood sings. Pick the one that sounds less like a cooking accident. Translations pile up. Latin borrowed from Greek, patched with Arabic, smoothed by French, scribbled by monks who thought spleen was just a poetic way to say bad mood. The result? A 1,000-year game of anatomical telephone where a small intestine may become divine rope of digestion. You're meant to base your treatments on this, so you do what everyone does. Choose the version that sounds smartest, or shortest, or, if desperate, the one that rhymes. Then you read it aloud to your patient, with conviction. That's what counts. Could be quoting kitchen recipes, but if you do it in Latin with a furrowed brow, people will nod. You meet another physician. He trained in Paris. His Galen is different. His Galen believes yellow bile makes people laugh. Yours believes it makes people irritable. You argue, quietly, politely, with quills raised. Eventually you agree to disagree and prescribe both laughter and a vomit-inducing powder. The patient is confused, but too weak to protest. Sometimes a nobleman demands to know which Galen you follow. You panic. You invent a name. The Venetian edition, you say. Corrected by the monks of St. Basil, he nods, impressed. You nod too. Later, you write it down in case someone asks again. In private, you long for clarity. Single, clean. Sentence. Something like, fever is common. Rest and fluids may help. But your scrolls say the fire of nature, when unrestrained by cold humors, may burneth to bright and thus offend the balance. So that's what you prescribe. Balance. In vague advice, you tell your patient to avoid heat or cold. Much wind? Possibly strong emotions? They blink. They nod. You chew a mint leaf and look disappointed. You close your book. You try again tomorrow, asterisk. You're not sure if you're sick or just temperamental. Because in Galen's world, you're not simply tired or anxious or prone to sneezing at inopportune times. No, your entire personality is shaped by IV fluids sloshing around your body like untrained actors trying to improvise a tragedy. Blood, phlegm, yellow, bile, black bile. These are your puppeteers, and they've been drinking. According to Galen, you and everyone else fall into one of 4 temperaments. You learn them early in your training, like medieval astrology, but wetter. They're sanguine, cheerful, energetic, probably annoying. Too much blood. Then choleric, hot-headed, driven, yells at bakers. Too much yellow bile. Phlegmatic, slow-moving, calm, possibly asleep, too much phlegm, and melancholic, gloomy, thoughtful. Writes poetry in the rain. Overdosed on black bile. You diagnose your first patient with melancholy. Why? He sighs a lot. That's enough. You prescribe warm baths, music in a minor key, and boiled lentils. He returns a week later, still sighing. You assume he didn't follow the lentil instructions correctly. Next comes a woman who complains of dizziness and laughter at inappropriate moments. Clearly sanguine, too much blood. You bleed her gently. Then again, not so gently. She becomes less cheerful. You declare the treatment a success. A merchant comes in raging about his apprentice, slams his hand on your table, shouts about theft, betrayal, and mutton. Choleric, you give him vinegar tea and a quiet corner. He refuses both. Try again with cooled wine and a drawing of a peaceful sheep. It helps slightly then. There's the shepherd who sits down and immediately falls asleep, phlegmatic. You try to wake him with loud chanting and a goat bell. No response. You prescribe exercise, radishes, and awkward conversations. Of course, most people don't fit neatly into these boxes. Some are cheerful and gloomy, angry in the morning, sleepy by dusk. But that just means their humors are even. More imbalanced. You prescribe complicated solutions. Warm water at dawn, fennel paste at noon, staring at the moon in silence every other Tuesday. No one understands this, least of all you. But it feels official. That's what matters. The temperaments become more than just a medical theory. They turn into gossip. Don't marry her, someone says. She's choleric. But of course he lied. Another whispers, he's full of phlegm. Temperaments explain everything. Anger, sadness, ambition, hiccups. Even goats are said to be melancholic in winter. You meet a child who throws rocks at birds and sings to her reflection. You're asked for a diagnosis. You pause. Complex sanguine melancholic tendencies with solar aggravation. Praised. The child throws another rock. You begin to see the world in humors. Your friend is too yellow. Your brother is dangerously phlegmy. You yourself, well, you've always suspected your black bile throws parties when you're asleep. You recommend balancing everything. Always. Whether it's food, mood, or moonlight exposure. Galen says harmony is health. You believe him, mostly except on Wednesdays, when you feel particularly melancholic and swear? Okay, the goat is judging you again, which probably just means you need more fennel, or less goat. Asterisk centuries have passed. Galen is still on the syllabus. You'd think by now someone would have replaced him with something more accurate, like personal experience or the results of literally any experiment. But no, Galen remains the gold standard. Not because he was right, but because no one has dared to write a better book. His work has become furniture. It's not useful, not questioned, just ... there. Every scholar references him. Every physician quotes him. Every library has his volumes, covered in dust and reverence. You've seen copies so old they crumble when breathed on, still treated with more respect than the sick person in the next room. You hear whispers, sometimes, in the darker corners of monasteries, or among those peculiar types who own magnifying glasses. They say things like veins don't actually pulse, or the liver doesn't make thoughts, or maybe we should look inside a human body, just once to check. Dangerous ideas? You ignore them. Publicly, but in your private thoughts. Those foggy, risky rooms inside your skull, you wonder? Could Galen have been wrong about some things? Most things? Everything. Then you go back to treating patients, using the same scrolls, the same diagrams, the same elaborate language to describe basic symptoms. Galen doesn't mention toothaches, but you manage. You call it dental fire imbalance. You bleed the arm. You recommend fasting. You offer prayers to St. Apollonia. The patient groans. You nod. Healing one day, a man returns, someone you treated with 5 leeches and a sermon. He looks terrible, but alive. He says your remedy helped. You're surprised. Then he admits he didn't use the remedy. He ate soup and took a nap. You stare into the middle distance. You write it down anyway. Recovery credited to rebalanced. Humors and appropriate humility. This is the power of Galen. He explains everything, even when he explains nothing. He is flexible enough to justify all outcomes. A patient dies? The disease was stronger than balance. A patient lives. The treatment worked, or the moon helped, or divine favor, or something you did without realizing it. You start seeing Galen. Everywhere in noble courts, village huts, battlefield tents. His words, translated and retranslated and garbled into sacred confusion, still govern the way people bleed fast and suffer politely. Even healers who barely read still believe in him. His name alone carries weight. Say it during a diagnosis, and people straighten up, nodding as if truth itself just entered the room on velvet slippers. But knowledge is shifting. You can feel it. A barber in town has been experimenting with cleaning wounds, with washing hands, not applying dung and pigeon droppings to open sores. Radical stuff. His patient seemed alive. You ask him what he thinks of Galen, he shrugs. He had some good ideas. Shame about the liver. You nod slowly. It's as close to blasphemy as you're willing to accept. Still, the next time someone comes in with a cough, you don't reach for powdered toad. You offer rest. Warm broth. Maybe. Even water. You say it's galenic. You lie. You think you are a whole person. You are not, in the ancient and medieval imagination. Your body is a divided kingdom, full of restless provinces, anxious residents, and rogue organs that might simply get up and leave if they feel underappreciated. Chief among these troublemakers? The womb. If you are unfortunate enough to possess one, the womb is not just an organ. It is a small, independent creature. A soft, slippery animal living in your belly, capable of movement, mischief, and mood swings. Physicians believed it could. Roam through your torso like a homesick weasel, poking around until it found something to annoy. Feel dizzy? The womb might be climbing toward your head. Chest pain? It's probably resting on your lungs. Sudden panic? That's just your uterus trying to crawl into your throat and take over your breathing. A small organ with big ambitions. They called it hysteria, from the Greek hystera meaning womb. And from this cheerful etymology sprang centuries of delightful theories about why women might be moody, tired, or unwilling to churn butter on command. The answer, according to many learned men with zero first-hand knowledge of the condition, was that the womb had wandered. You're not sure why? Maybe it got bored. Maybe it wanted sunlight. Maybe it was offended by something your liver said. But the treatments were imaginative. To coax the womb back to its proper place, doctors recommended smoke from above and below. Fragrant herbs near the nostrils to draw it upward. Acrid, smelly things near the pelvis to chase it downward. Like herding a very confused mole with a fondness for lavender and a fear of onions. Sometimes they used music. The idea was that soft, rhythmic sounds would lull the womb into calming down and staying put.
How way you imagine a tiny uterus swaying too.
a lute sighing dramatically before curling up behind the bladder like a cat in a sunbeam. And of course, this marriage was always suggested because apparently a wandering womb was just lonely and needed company. A husband would fix everything, presumably by boring it into submission. But the uterus wasn't alone. Other organs were also accused of freelancing. The spleen was thought to generate melancholy, leaking sadness into your bloodstream like a disillusioned poet. The liver handled passion, the stomach, anxiety, the heart. Well, obviously, the heart was a deeply emotional creature who took everything personally. Even flatulence had a personality. Trapped gas could travel upward, cause confusion, ruin your mood, and in some cases, lead to fainting spells that ended with someone dramatically announcing, "It's the vapors." Your body, it turns out, was not a single system. It was a boarding house full of opinionated residents, most of them easily offended, and some actively rebellious. And you were just the landlord, trying to keep the rent paid, and hoping the womb didn't climb the stairs again. Asterisk, asterisk, you're feeling a little lightheaded, a bit woozy. The room spins gently, like a polite carousel. Someone immediately declares, "It's the vapors." You don't know what that means? But it's said with such confidence that it feels correct. In medieval and early modern thought, vapors explained everything that couldn't be blamed on demons or bile. They were invisible forces, ghostly breezes that escaped from your organs, or entered through your pores and scrambled your thoughts like eggs left too long in a pan. A fainting spell? Vapors. Sudden weeping. Yes. Vapors, the urge to slap your cousin during Sunday supper. Vapors again. They drifted up from the stomach, the womb, even the intestines, and invaded the brain. Some were hot, some were cold, all were inconvenient. Might not see them. But you could definitely feel them, especially when they made you forget your own name in front of the bishop. You ask for water. Someone brings you vinegar. You ask for rest. You're given a cloth soaked in rose oil and told to inhale deeply. Will correct your internal fog, they say. You're not convinced. The theory is simple. The body produces vapors through digestion. The worse your meal, the worse your vapors. Beans, dangerous. Leeks, chaotic. Anything boiled 3 times in goat milk, practically fatal. And it doesn't stop with food. Motions create vapors too. If you get too angry, your liver steams. If you get too sad, your spleen mists. If you laugh too hard, your lungs might exhale something so troubling that it climbs directly to your head and makes you sit down suddenly in a field, unsure of who you are or why your shoes are full of turnips. To treat vapors, you are told to walk slowly, avoid sunlight, and sleep with one leg exposed to balance your inner winds. You try it. You get cold. You do not feel balanced. Your toes revolt. More advanced treatments involve herbs, dried, burned, soaked in wine. You're encouraged. To sniff thyme, rub mint on your chest, and chew fennel soaked in salt water, all while maintaining a serene expression, so your anxiety doesn't scare the vapors into hiding elsewhere. Women, of course, are thought to be especially vulnerable. Their humors are considered wetter, softer, and far more prone to internal. Weather disturbances, a lady faints in church. Vapors, a girl forgets her chores and starts singing to a spoon. Definitely vapors. A widow begins speaking her mind. Dangerous, weaponized vapors. Men are not immune, just quieter about it. A nobleman sighs at dinner and drops his fork, excuses himself. He was overcome. Staff nods knowingly. A servant opens a window. You begin to wonder if vapors are simply the polite way of saying, "I need a break and I don't want to talk about it." Still, you carry a small cloth soaked in lavender, just in case. You fan yourself discreetly. When the dizziness comes, you lie on the cool stone floor and blame. It's the vapors. It's easier than explaining your feelings, and no one argues with gas. Asterisk. You probably don't think much about your spleen. That's a mistake. In historical medicine, the spleen isn't just a quiet little bean-shaped organ tucked politely behind your stomach. No, it's a meddler, a troublemaker. The emotional rascal of your inner world, dripping melancholy into your bloodstream like an ex-boyfriend who writes poetry about fog. You wake up feeling blue. The day feels like wet parchment. You sigh. The healer sighs louder and announces, "Your spleen is acting up again. There's no test. There's no stethoscope. Just a long look at your posture and a confident nod. Melancholy, they say. Cold and dry. The worst of the humors. Caused by an overambitious spleen leaking black bile into your system. It's black bile. Not a metaphor, but a literal imagined. Fluid slowly coats your soul like soot in a chimney. You are told to avoid sadness. Sour fruit and poetry written after dusk. You fail on all 3 counts by lunchtime. The spleen is blamed for more than sadness. Laziness, spleen, overthinking, spleen. That strange urge to lie face down in a meadow and wait for birds to forget you exist. Definitely spleen. The treatments are rarely cheerful. Warm compresses, bitter herbs, and gentle lectures. You may be prescribed singing. Not because it helps, but because it distracts you from the fact that your spleen can't be reasoned with. You sing. Your spleen sulks. It's a tense relationship. Some suggest exercise, specifically slow, melancholy walks along cold riverbanks. If you see your reflection and start weeping, the treatment is working. Others believe in purging. If the black bile is causing problems, the obvious solution is to get it out. You are offered a potion made of boiled chicory, vinegar, ash bark, and something that once touched a leech. It tastes like regret and damp shoes. You lie down afterward, stomach rebelling. Spleen unbothered. The spleen even appears in literature, not in a friendly way. Poets describe being spleeny as a state of inexplicable irritability. Playwrights blame spleenful moods for broken marriages and dramatic exits. Somewhere in a village far away, someone's sheep wandered off and they blamed the spleen. You. Try to monitor your own. You eat cautiously. No cold pears. No late-night worries. No prolonged eye contact with funerary statues. Still, the sadness comes. You decide to distract your spleen by talking to it gently. It ignores you, so you drink a mixture of cinnamon and goat's milk. Wrap yourself in wool and read cheerful scripture aloud. Your neighbor walks by and hears. You yelling praise be to warmth from under a blanket? They report that your spleen must be flaring again. You nod, safer than explaining. There's comfort, strangely, in blaming the spleen. It's not you, after all. You're not weak or hopeless. You're simply hosting a moody organ with too many opinions and no sense of timing. You lie back, you breathe. The spleen breathe. Tomorrow, you'll try singing again. Your heart flutters, your cheeks flush. You glance across the market square and feel something deep, ancient, irrational. A crush. No. Worse. Your liver is acting up. In the pre-modern body, the liver isn't just a humble filtration station. The grand architect of emotion, the glowing hearth of your inner fire, the first organ to fall in love and the first to sulk when rejected. According to ancient physicians, especially those following Galenic theory, the liver was the origin. Of the blood was the seat of emotion, and so the liver was basically your romantic life in glandular form. If you felt attraction, longing, or poetic despair, it was because your liver was brimming with too much hot blood and simply couldn't contain itself. You glance at someone. Your pulse quickens. The healer says, "Ah, the liver boils." Ask what to do. They recommend a light purge, a vinegar rinse, and an immediate change of scenery. Falling in love is dangerous, not for your soul, but for your liver, which they say could swell from unrequited heat and cause internal weeping. You picture your liver crying quietly in the dark. You feel bad for it. You eat fewer figs, of course. The liver doesn't just love. It also sulks, rages, and occasionally withdraws entirely, becoming cold, a condition associated with sluggishness, disinterest, and sighing into your bread. If the liver cools too much, you're prescribed hot wine, foot rubs, and enthusiastic storytelling. One woman is diagnosed with liver melancholy because she stopped smiling at her neighbor's chicken. Young man has bled dramatically after confessing. He composed a sonnet in the direction of a nun. The treatments vary, but most involve herbs that smell like apology and regret. Your own liver's complicated. It responds to music, rebels at cloudy days. It grows restless in spring when the geese return and everyone starts complimenting each other's elbows. You try to soothe it with warm meals, long walks, and gentle poetry. Nothing works. You are advised to marry again, as if you're livers. Romantic distress could be solved by filing paperwork and sharing a blanket with someone who owns land. You resist. You try singing instead. The liver is unimpressed. Eventually, you fall ill, a fever, possibly unrelated. Possibly caused by eating 3 apples and thinking too deeply about a shepherd's smile. The healer diagnoses liver inflammation from longing. You are told to rest. But not too much, or the liver will feel ignored. You're caught in the middle of a delicate negotiation with an organ. It thinks it's a poet. You sigh. Liver sighs louder. You press a hand to your ribs and whisper, "We're going to be fine." The liver flutters. You drink a tea of rose petals and basil, recommended by someone who once successfully fell out of love by smelling geraniums for 3 weeks. Straight, your fever breaks, your liver forgives you. You move on until someone compliments your eyebrows, and it all begins again. Asterix, you like to think you're thinking, but according to the ancients, you are not. Thinking real, meaningful thinking doesn't happen in the brain. It's not really. The brain is simply a cooling unit. Sponge for blood. A kind of moist towel draped across the top of your body to keep your heart from overheating. You're told this with absolute certainty. You blink slowly as your brain quietly simmers with protest. Galen, who still holds court in every dusty corner, of medicine, believed the brain was cold and wet by nature. Not metaphorically, physically, damp, slippery, unimpressive. He allowed that it might be involved in sensation. But mostly, it was there to temper the fiery passions of your chest. A kind of emotional bucket of ice water. Your thoughts, your soul, your choices, all of those are considered matters of the heart or liver. The brain just chills, literally, possibly with condensation. You ask carefully then, what's inside the head? Your teacher draws a diagram. It's a rough sketch. Skull, eyes, vague nose, and within the skull, several hollow spaces. Ventricles, they say, which contain your animal spirits. These are not ghosts or relatives, just vaporous, semi-divine. Mists that float around and deliver messages like badly trained pigeons. If your animal spirits become confused or thick, you lose clarity. You forget words. You walk into a wall. You speak Latin backward. It's a bad case of thick spirits once. Caused a priest to marry a goat? That's the story anyway. The goat remains unavailable for comment, and what affects these spirits? Everything, weather, bad cheese, emotional upheaval, sneezing at the wrong phase of the moon. One patient developed vertigo because he stood too close to a basil plant during an argument. The basil was fine. His brain was not to treat brain problems. Physicians offer helpful solutions like smelling mint, placing cool stones on the forehead, or applying crushed violets mixed with vinegar to the temples. You try this, your head smells like pickled. Sadness. If that doesn't work, trepanation might. That's where they gently saw a hole in your skull to release excess pressure or naughty spirits. Gently, of course, just a small window. You ask if this helps? The answer sometimes. The longer answer, it depends on the size of the spirit and the sharpness of the saw. You begin to miss your spleen. At least it had the decency to stay inside your body and sulk. Meanwhile, your brain is blamed for confusion, delirium, misremembering. Prayers and once, a baker who invented 3 new saints during a head cold. No one questioned him. Saints had good names. Still, you persist. You read, you reason, you sense deep inside your cold, wet, underestimated brain that it's doing more than just chilling your passions. You don't say this out loud. Instead, you adjust your violet compress, breathe in mint, and hope your animal spirits are feeling cooperative. And if they aren't, you'll blame the basil. Asterisk, you haven't been paying attention to your kidneys. That's a mistake in historical medicine. They're not just filtration stations quietly working in the background. No, the kidneys are schemers. Moody twins lurking near your spine, controlling more than their fair share of bodily decisions. If your back aches, your temper flares, or your urine changes color, they are immediately accused, and not always fairly. You feel a twinge in your side. Someone frowns and says your kidneys are withholding. You don't know what that means, but it sounds serious. Like your kidneys are sulking in the dark, arms crossed, refusing to participate in polite biological conversation. There's no polite way to inspect them, so your healer does the only thing that makes sense in this situation. Examines your urine closely in full daylight, sometimes by candlelight too, just to be thorough. They swirl it around in a glass, lift it to the sun, sniff it, and in the boldest moments, taste it. There is no such thing as dignity in this diagnostic ritual. It's only confidence and a tolerance for very warm beverages. You're told your urine is cloudy with hints of melancholy. You're prescribed a parsley infusion and a strict ban on turnips. Try to obey. But someone slips turnips into your stew and your back starts hurting again. Clearly, the kidneys know. According to older texts, the kidneys were associated with anger, desire, and secret moral decay. They weren't just filters, they were watchers. Observers of your hidden behavior. One theologian even suggested the kidneys report your sins to God. You're not sure if they write it down or whisper it through the bladder. But the implication is clear. Your kidneys are snitches. You begin to treat them with respect. You sleep. On your side to keep them comfortable, you avoid salty foods. You apologize to them in moments of stress. I didn't mean to feel that jealousy, you whisper. That was the spleen. Honest. Still, the pain returns. The healer prescribes hot compresses, more parsley, and gentle humming. You lie still, stomach down, as someone sings to your kidneys with a reed flute. It feels ... awkward. You begin to question everything, especially when your healer declares your kidney imbalance has migrated possibly to the left ear. You are now wearing a poultice of boiled radish and sheep's wool around your head. The kidney, apparently, is learning ventriloquism. If nothing else works, you are offered more extreme measures. Sweating treatments, baths in mineral-rich mud, or even in cases of extreme disobedience, a week-long fast where you consume only warm goat broth and think forgiving thoughts. One person in town claims he cured his kidney problems by not speaking for a month, sleeping with his feet pointing north. You consider it. The truth is, no one knows what the kidneys do. Not really. But they're treated like troubled nobles, sensitive, powerful, vengeful. You treat them gently, speak to them kindly, and sip your parsley tea with the humility of someone under surveillance. And if the pain goes away, you thank the kidneys aloud, just in case they're listening. You haven't eaten much today. Not because there's no food. The bread is more wooden than edible and the soup appears to have ambitions unrelated to digestion, but because your stomach has opinions, loud ones, in medieval and ancient. Thought the stomach wasn't just a bag that grumbled. It was an emotional command center, a nervous diplomat between your body and your soul, a slippery, steaming pouch of instincts and anxieties. If something was wrong, it told you by churning, clenching, and occasionally threatening to empty itself with dramatic flair. You sigh. The healer raises an eyebrow. Ah, nervous stomach. You were diagnosed before you even describe your symptoms. There's a long history of this idea. Elin thought. Digestion required peace of mind. Eat angry, your food rebels. Eat afraid, your humors curdle. The stomach was a sensitive artist, easily offended by harsh words, unseasoned peas, or sudden changes in wind direction. So when you feel uneasy, that flutter in your belly, that creeping discomfort just below the ribs, the healer doesn't ask what's worrying you. They ask what you ate yesterday and whether it was accompanied by envy, melancholy, or goat-related stress. Your answer, all of the above. Treatment begins. You are told to lie down with a cloth of warm chamomile on your abdomen. Someone chants a verse about intestinal harmony. Then comes the tea, fennel, mint, and possibly crushed pigeon feather. You sip carefully. It tastes like regret after a bad conversation. The stomach, it is explained, sits near the seat of fear. If it overhears too many emotional discussions from the liver, or is jostled by the womb mid-wander, it throws a tantrum. This can result in bloating, belching, spontaneous weeping, or dramatic gas. You experience 3 of the 4 by sunset. Some healers believe dreams can upset the stomach, especially if they're unsettling or involve fruit in unnatural colors. Others warn against eating while standing, as this confuses the stomach and encourages rebellion. You picture your stomach sulking in the corner like a toddler who didn't get picked for a medieval sack race. One patient in town was said to have suffered a turning stomach after watching a chicken lay an unusually spherical egg. She spent 3 days under a wool blanket, sipping celery water and whispering apologies to her midsection. You understand her. Eventually, you were prescribed gentle walking, mild laughter, and the avoidance of garlic and political arguments. Follow all 3. Mostly, you accidentally step on a leak and are overcome with abdominal guilt. You try to be kind to your stomach. You stroke it when no one's looking. You hum softly. You avoid sudden gestures and avoid thinking too much about mortality while chewing, and if the anxious churning returns, you lie back, breathe, you blame the peas. The peas always know. Asterisk, you sneeze. Just once. Not a big one. A polite little puff, the kind that barely earns a blessing today. But in centuries past, that sneeze would have stirred suspicion, prayers, and possibly a vinegar-soaked cloth waved under your nose by someone who believed your soul nearly escaped. Because breath, the invisible in and out of your life, wasn't just air. It was spirit, vital force, divine loan. Every exhale risked losing something important, and every sneeze was like a door blowing open during a storm. Something might leave. Something else might enter. You didn't just sneeze. You transgressed it. It was believed that breath carried more than oxygen. It was the vessel of your inner balance. If your breath was steady, so were your humors. If it was erratic, shallow, wheezing, rattled, something had gone wrong inside. Too much heat too. Much cold. Too many bad thoughts. Or the wrong kind of cheese. The healer listens to you breathe. They squint. They frown. They declare your rhythm unnatural and recommend chest cupping, a sleep fast, and licorice root boiled in donkey's milk. You protest. They respond with a proverb about wind and virtue. You stop asking. Sneezing, in particular, was its own theological event. Some believed it expelled evil spirits. Others feared it invited them. In one town, a man sneezed 3 times during a sermon and was carried out under a wool blanket, lest his spirit get ideas and float away. To sneeze near a candle was especially dangerous. Your soul could leap into the flame. To sneeze in bed meant restless dreams. To sneeze while cooking fish was widely discouraged, though no one could agree on why. Cures for bad breath, and not the dental kind, the spiritual kind, were inventive. You could carry rosemary tucked in your sleeve. You could burn sage while walking in figure eights. You could gargle with warm honey and lemon, but only if the lemons were picked under a waxing moon. Otherwise, they encouraged flatulenza. You try the herbs, you try the prayers, you sneeze again. A goat outside the window bleats in judgment. Breath, they tell you, is the thread that connects the organs. Your lungs must keep peace between the liver, the heart, the spleen, and whatever the stomach's latest mood is. One hiccup, literal or metaphorical, and the balance is lost. You practice controlled breathing. You hum. You meditate while holding a damp cloth to your forehead. The healer calls this air management. You call it sitting still. And trying not to explode. Still, your breath betrays you. In moments of panic, it flutters. In moments of joy, it leaps. In moments of silence, it snores. The body, it turns out, has no interest in your dignity. But you adjust. You walk slowly. You sip herbal mist from a warmed bowl. You sneeze into your elbow, mutter an apology to the air, and glance skyward just in case something heard. And when the wind shifts, you hold your breath. Just a little. You never know who might be listening. Asterisk, you blink. You look around. The world appears mostly where you left it, but for a good stretch of history, people weren't. So sure, the eyes you see weren't just passive recipients of light. They were projectors, emitters, beams of soft, sentient flame reaching out to touch what you looked at. You didn't just see a tree, your eyes reached out and caressed it with a tiny, invisible hand. This was called the extramission. Theory? It was science, or close enough. And with that theory came a peculiar concern that your eyes might act independently, wander, linger, even betray you. You're walking through town. You glance sideways at a tapestry. It's later someone accuses you of flirtation. You're confused until you realize your eyes were misinterpreted. Or maybe they acted on their own, the healer agrees. Yes, he says. A case of wandering gaze not uncommon. The eyes have moods. Your prescribed eye fasting, limited looking, and a compress of cooled sage leaves. Also, no staring at shiny things, looking too much, they say weakens. The heart. Looking at the wrong thing, it can corrupt the soul. Looking at a person too long, it could cause pregnancy. Yes, really. In some circles, it was believed that a gaze could transmit desire, heat, or even seed. You stare too long across a market stall, and months later, someone's cousin gives birth with your nose. A scandal of the pupils, a tragic case of retinal seduction. To prevent this, people wore eye charms, pendants, or tokens that soaked up excess gaze energy. Some covered their eyes with linen veils, not out of modesty, but to reduce emotional combustion. You are told to avoid mirrors, reflective surfaces, and certain birds. Owls in particular were seen as carriers of corrupt gaze energy. If an owl stared at you too long, you might never sleep again. Or worse, fall in love with the town baker's dog. You try to control your eyes. You squint modestly. You practice. Downward glances. Avoid direct eye contact with statues and other unsettling shapes. Your eyes itch. They are not amused. Meanwhile, illnesses of the eyes are interpreted as character flaws. A sty? You looked at something sinful? Redness. You saw too much? Too quickly? Wateriness? Emotional leakage? Eyelid twitching? Soul trying to escape through the margins? You hear of one man who blindfolded himself for an entire Lent to avoid temptation. You walked into a wall and claimed enlightenment. You're skeptical? Still, your vision blurs. The healer recommends a salve of crushed rose petals and goat saliva. You pretend to apply it. Instead, you close your eyes, lie in the dark, and try to imagine your gaze curled up neatly like a cat resting, not roaming. Eventually, you sleep and dream of owls. Asterisk. You lie very still. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because movement might encourage. It's something to move with you, or worse, without you. In older medical thinking, your body is less like a sealed jar and more like a leaky basket of overactive roommates. Each organ has ambition. Each fluid has a schedule. Nothing inside you wants to stay put. The challenge is not keeping yourself alive. It's keeping your parts inside. The womb, of course, is the worst offender. It still wanders despite the herbs and lectures. But now it's joined by others. The stomach gurgles and grumbles like it's packing a suitcase. The liver sighs dramatically. The spleen mutters. Even your lungs, once dependable, seem to drift a little too freely inside your chest. You shift in bed. Something shifts with you. You freeze. The healer says that's your gallbladder moving to express dissatisfaction. You nod, afraid. To ask where it's going or what it wants, an entire branch of medical thought revolves around the fear of internal migration. Organs drifting, fluids rising, bones floating. It wasn't metaphor, it was the daily anxiety of being a bag of slightly rebellious creatures who might rearrange themselves while you nap. You're told to avoid vigorous jostling. No climbing stairs too quickly, no laughing too hard, definitely no jumping. One boy jumped over a puddle and was said to have dislodged his pancreas. He was fine, but emotionally altered ever since. If you have a fever, the healer might say your humors are trying to evacuate. If you have a cough, it's your lungs protesting their placement. If your belly aches, someone whispers that your intestines may be attempting an escape route. You clutch your abdomen, just in case. Certain foods are known to anchor the organs. Thick soups, heavy grains, ale. You are fed like a sandbag. You are encouraged to lie flat afterward, to let gravity do its work. On the other hand, some foods loosen the spirits. Pears, beans, anything pickled. One unfortunate woman was served fermented cabbage and reported a sudden sense that her kidneys were drifting toward her thighs. To keep everything in place, you may be wrapped. Belts, bands, warm cloths, gentle pressure to keep the anatomy. Obedient. You resemble a rolled pastry, tucked snug and secure. You are not comfortable, but you are contained. And then there's the wind. Yes, internal wind. It causes bloating, of course, but also confusion, sorrow, and the disorientation of organs caught in its currents. Your body, according to lore, has weather, some days, are stormier than others. You wake in the night and feel ... loose. Not physically, just conceptually. Imagine your spleen drifting slowly toward your hip like a melancholic jellyfish. Whisper not tonight. Eventually, you learn not to think of your body as you, but as a small community of anxious strangers, all trying to relocate. You breathe slowly. You lie flat. You drink barley water and hope it convinces your liver to stay. You close your eyes. Everything quiets. For now, asterisk, you're ill. Not gravely, not dramatically, just enough to warrant concern. But this time, you are wealthy, which means your illness is now an opportunity for display, for luxury, for turning a cough into a conversation starter and a fever into a performance. Peace involving rare herbs and men in embroidered robes. The physician arrives in silk. He smells faintly of cloves and entitlement. His beard is too perfect. Shoes have never met mud. He carries a satchel of tools, none of which you recognize, all of which sparkle ominously under the lamplight. You are reclined on a chaise, draped in fur. You attempt to look fragile. He nods approvingly. First comes the gold. Not metaphorical gold. Real gold. Powdered, milled into dust finer than gossip, mixed into syrup or wine. It is believed to elevate the humors, strengthen the heart, and remind your organs that you are richer than death. You sip it. Tastes like metal and ambition. Next comes the goose fat, warm applied to the chest, or sometimes the soles of your feet. To draw the illness downward, the physician says, if disease respects gravity, the fat is sticky, comforting, and vaguely poultry-scented. You try not to wrinkle your nose. A servant brings hot stones wrapped in velvet. They are placed strategically, one by your ribs, another under your neck, a third where the physician thinks your worries live. You are told to breathe deeply and think noble thoughts. There is no bleeding, not for the wealthy. Bleeding is for peasants and livestock. You are instead offered leeches perfumed with lavender. They arrive in a small gold-trimmed jar, like particularly determined caviar. Exotic, the physician whispers. You nod. Your urine is examined discreetly behind a screen. It's by someone whose job title is vague and whose gloves are unnecessarily embroidered. They emerge with solemn news. Your humors are unbalanced, but not fatally so. You may continue eating figs, but must avoid almonds for at least a fortnight. A pigeon is waved near your head. You are told it absorbs the excess heat of your brain. The pigeon looks skeptical. So do you. But the physician insists. You both sit there, quietly, thinking different thoughts. The treatments are gentle, artistic, full of ceremony and subtle fragrance. Dried roses, orange peels, cinnamon tied in silk. No bitter bark, no harsh purging, no boiled onion poultices that make the walls weep. You are not expected to recover quickly. In fact, lingering illness is fashionable. It proves your sensitivity, your moral complexity. Your body, like your poetry, simply responds more deeply to the world. You receive visitors. They bring honeyed plums and worried glances. One offers a poem. Another offers gossip. Both are meant to soothe. At night, your room smells like cardamom and candle wax. You are wrapped in linen. You sip warm milk laced with ground pearl and whisper to your own spleen with aristocratic affection. You're not getting better, but you are being treated beautifully. Asterisk, you're not entirely sold on the leeches, but you're wealthy, and wealth demands rituals. So you nod with aristocratic hesitation as the physician reaches into a glass jar and retrieves what looks like a shiny comma with ambition. This one, he murmurs, was raised on rosemary, as if that makes it better. In truth, leeches are everywhere. The poor use them in buckets, the rich in boxes lined with velvet. But here in your candlelit chamber with its ceiling painted like an early Renaissance sneeze, they are presented like art. Each leech is gently dabbed in perfumed water rose, thyme, lavender, so that their feeding, while still horrible, is at least fragrant. You are bled not because you are overfooled, but because your soul has become too dense. You're told the pressure behind your eyes is due to philosophical congestion. You might have read too much, or listened to someone talk about theology with too much passion. The only remedy, of course, is polite exsanguination. The physician places a leech near your elbow. You flinch, he says. It will know what to do. You're unsure if he means the leech or your arm. The sensation is ... a soft pinch, like being judged by a damp raisin. Then a slow warmth, like someone drawing secrets from your blood. You lie back and focus on the painted ceiling where cherubs are attempting to juggle laurel wreaths with limited success. You are told not to look at the leech. You look anyway. It is tripled in size. It is now smug. When the leech is full, it is detached with a whisper and a gentle flick of salt water. It is then placed in a recovery dish, as if it too needs a nap and a sip of something restorative. You ask if that's it? He shakes his head. Now comes the ceremonial binding. A fine cloth is wrapped around your arm, embroidered. Of course, not to stop bleeding, but to encourage the blood to continue seeping for the appropriate amount of time. Release is part of the refinement, he says, as if your life force were staging a dramatic exit. Sometimes you're bled from the foot, or behind the ear. Or, in one case, from the region of excess imagination, which seems to involve the left thigh. You don't ask questions, you simply offer limbs. The point isn't healing, it's balance. The rich must not appear robust. Health is considered slightly vulgar, but an elegant pallor, a touch of delicate anemia. Now that's refinement. After the bleeding, you're given a small pastry and a sip of fortified wine. Now for strength. For symbolism, you've shed the bad. You now receive the good. It's all very theatrical. You almost expect applause. You lie back. The leech twitches in its dish. You feel no different. But the room smells of time and assurance. And that, apparently, is the whole point. Asterisk. You're not just ill, you're fashionably ill. Because for the wealthy, sickness isn't merely a biological inconvenience. It's a statement, a performance, a curated condition. And if you're going to be horizontal for a week, you might as well do it in silk. You recline on your couch, layered in carefully arranged blankets like a human pastry. Pale but not deathly. One, but tasteful. You've practiced your sick expression, just enough suffering to inspire sympathy. Not so. Much that anyone becomes uncomfortable or suggests boiled onions, you are visited by friends. They speak in hushed tones, offer honeyed fruit, and admire your bravery in the face of such gentle, refined adversity. A lady says you're positively luminous. Cough modestly and dab your lips with a cloth embroidered with your initials. And a small, golden bird. It's unclear if the bird is medical or metaphorical. No one asks. This is what illness is supposed to look like when you have money. Your room smells like cinnamon and beeswax. The light is filtered through linen curtains dyed the color of faded violets. Even your suffering has a palate. Meanwhile, in the corner, a servant stands ready with a fan made of swan feathers, not to cool you, but to maintain atmosphere. You cough once every hour. No more, no less. Too much coughing is considered vulgar. You are attended by a physician, of course, but also by a poet who occasionally murmurs verses beside your bed to stimulate healing through rhythm. The poems don't rhyme, That's how you know they're expensive. You overhear someone describe your condition as poetically grave. You glow with pride or fever. Either works. Your food is curated. Pale broths, soft pears, golden jellies, served in silver bowls. Nothing crunchy. Illness doesn't crunch.
You sip slowly, dramatically, with the gravity of someone who understands.
Their stomach is more philosophical than physical. And then there's the outfit. You don't wear just anything while decaying gently. You wear your sick robes loose, flowing garments in soft tones, linen in summer, velvet in winter, embroidered with constellations or florals. Depending on the season and the diagnosis, even your slippers have a matching ribbon. The healer checks your pulse while commenting on your sleeve trim. You nod. Because illness for the rich must be aesthetic. If you recover looking disheveled, people question your choices. But if you emerge from your illness like a swan from a lavender-scented pond, cleansed, scented, softly humming, then the treatment was a success, no matter how little it actually helped. Some say this obsession is ridiculous, that true healing should be silent, private, and preferably over quickly. But those people eat crunchy bread while ill and don't own fan dash bearers. You lie back, you fold your hands. You look toward the window with a sigh you practiced all morning outside. A servant arranges a small bouquet of healing herbs into a vase made of Venetian glass. Inside, you whisper, "I think I'm improving." Even if you're not, you look radiant, and that's what matters. Asterisk, asterisk, you're handed a goblet. It sparkles. It steams faintly. Almonds. And the kind of confidence that comes from inheriting a vineyard. You ask if it's medicine. The physician smiles and says, "It's an elixir." That's how you know it's going to be expensive, ineffective, served in a cup that costs more than your boots. Wealthy remedies are rarely bitter. Bitterness is for the poor, for those chewing bark and drinking onion water and unheeded. Barnes, but for you, your potions arrive infused with beauty. The goal is not to shock the system, but to seduce it into wellness. Like convincing your liver with compliments and flower arrangements. This potion, you are told, contains crushed pearl, a trace of ambergris, a syrup made from candied rose petals, something derived from a deer, though they won't say which part. Sip, it tastes like perfume with unresolved emotional issues. And yet you smile. Because suffering tastes better when it costs a fortune. Wealthy medicine is a fragrant affair. Most cures begin in the kitchen, not the grim. Boiling room kitchens of common households, but the spice kitchens of noble homes. Filled with saffron, cinnamon, myrrh, and someone whose only job is to stir things gently while humming. The potions are bottled in tinted glass, stoppered with beeswax. It's labeled in Latin. Sometimes they sparkle in sunlight. One even changes color based on your proximity to gold. That might be a coincidence, or a marketing ploy. You keep a shelf of them prominently. Displayed in your chamber, guests admire them. For balance, you explain vaguely. No one asks what kind of balance. Everyone nods. A nighttime elixir is brought with ceremony. It's warmed, poured into a cup shaped like a tulip, and served on a tray that includes a scented cloth for your wrists. You sip slowly, sweet, then sour, then something resembling lavender regret. You fall asleep confused but fragrant. Occasionally, a potion backfires. One time, you turned a faint shade of green for 2 days. The physician claimed this was proof it was working. Another made your ears ring like a monastery bell for a full week. Considered it spiritual. Still no one stops, because these potions are not just medicine, they are performance. They tell the world, you are refined, you're worthy of saffron and deer parts. You are unwell correctly, and so your shelf grows. Bottles of liquid moonlight. Drops of syrup made from flowers that bloom once per decade. Oils pressed from seeds blessed by 3 different monks. A cordial named after a comet. You no longer know what any of them do. But they do smell magnificent. You sneeze delicately. Someone rushes in with a vial labeled, in gold, elixir of evening calm. You take it. You nod. It tastes like liquid lullaby and minor regret. You feel no better, but your breath now smells like rose water and wealth, and that, for now, is enough. Asterisk, you're told to rest. Not in the practical sense, not the kind of rest that involves silence, darkness, and the soothing absence of responsibilities. No, this is wealthy rest, which means it's public, decorative, iterative. You're dressed in your resting robes, a linen tunic embroidered with stars, soft enough to wrinkle on command but stiff enough to suggest moral virtue. Your hair is gently tousled, artfully, undone by a servant who studied 3 portraits of saintly convalescence. You lie on a couch angled perfectly toward the window, where light filters through thin fabric dyed with crushed blueberries and modesty. You are a painting of fatigue. Guests arrive. They do not speak loudly. That would be inappropriate. Instead, they murmur observations about your posture. So dignified, one says, "She reclines like a thoughtful fern," says another. You are unsure what that means, but you nod faintly and exhale like someone who has been thinking softly for hours. This is rest. You are not allowed to read. Reading excites the blood. You are not allowed to write, so that tightens the spleen. Music is permitted, but only plucked string instruments, played slowly, ideally by someone with visible forearm veins. You are encouraged to listen with your eyelids. Food arrives in a tray that looks like a swan. There is broth, a poached pear, a spoon carved from bone. Everything tastes like aristocratic water. You close your eyes. A servant adjusts your pillow by half an inch. You whisper, "Thank you." You are offered more broth. You decline. A refusal is considered part of the healing. The physician visits to observe your resting. He nods at your stillness. He writes something in a book. You hope it's exceptional repose. He adds a second pillow for symbolic elevation. You are now taller, but not better. The window is opened. Only slightly. The breeze must circulate but not interfere. Not a flag, a plague. Cat is allowed into the room. It walks across your feet and disappears behind the curtain. Someone says even the animals know she is resting. You're not tired, but you dare not move. Moving implies recovery. Recovery implies an end to sympathy, an end to swan trays. It's an end to being described as luminous while horizontal. And so you perfect the art of noble stillness. You breathe in. 4 counts. You exhale in 5. You gaze at the ceiling like it might contain metaphor. A servant brings you warm water in a goblet shaped like a teardrop. You nod once. It's enough motion for the hour. At sunset, the light changes. So does the angle of your couch. No one asks. It simply happens. The shadows must flatter your recovery arc, and when the final guest whispers, "She is so brave," you don't respond. Not because you're asleep, but because the performance of resting has entered its final act. You are now glowing quietly while the room smells of jasmine, and your soup is warming nearby, untouched, as all good soup should be. Your fever is high, not dangerous, just dramatic. It's the kind of fever that warms the cheeks and clouds the gaze, that makes you sigh more often and speak in half-finished thoughts about windows, swans, and your childhood cat. You are gently delirious, and your physician is writing poetry. He sits by your bedside, legs elegantly crossed, a quill in one hand and a contemplative raisin in the other. Every so often he glances at your flushed face and mutters something like, "Yes, a coral moon rising through fog. You are not consulted." You cough. He nods. "Excellent," he whispers. Organic percussion. You've entered the stage of elite care where treatment and interpretation become one. Your fever isn't an illness, it's a muse. Your symptoms are metaphors. Your recovery will be reviewed in salons. The poem begins to take shape. In the palace of her ribs, the flame dances, soft as velvet geese, firm as knowing figs. You lose consciousness briefly. When you return, the physician is debating whether your spleen should be described as wistful or rebellious. You say both. He applauds your insight. A servant reads drafts aloud. Another fans your forehead while humming in a minor key. You are unsure if this helps, but the atmosphere feels literary. Every symptom becomes a stanza. Your fevered dreams are mined for narrative value. You mutter about a ship with no sails, This becomes the emotional climax. You mention carrots. This is edited out. Outside, the wind shifts. A bird lands on the sill. The physician declares, even nature senses the arc of her healing. You sneeze. He writes, the storm breaks. No one asks if your temperature is dropping. That would be gauche. Instead, they ask how inspired you feel. You say you're dizzy. Call it a visionary state. Later, a friend visits and reads. An early version of the poem. She cries. You cry? The physician cries. Someone writes that down too. Your urine is still examined. But now described in poetic terms, a morning fog, tinged with longing. You wonder quietly if anyone is actually trying to make you better. Then someone brings broth laced with marjoram. And honey, you sip. It tastes like rain mixed with admiration. You do not improve. But you are admired. Eventually the fever breaks, perhaps due to time or tincture or sheer poetic exhaustion. The physician adds a final stanza. The flame cools. The page dries. The patient radiant in decline. You are not declining, but radiant instability lack drama. You thank him. He bows. A copy of the poem is made, one for you, one for the library. One for the apothecary, who doesn't understand poetry but likes having his name appear in elegant verse. You lie back. It's a quill scratches in the corner. You are finally fever-free, but forever immortalized as the poem that sweated through 3 linen pillows and turned a raisin into a metaphor. Asterisk. You are recovering slowly, elegantly, publicly, which means it's time to start. Giving gifts not because you're healed, but because healing must be celebrated with a minimum of 6 parcels, 3 symbolic trinkets, and 1 slightly confusing fruit sculpture. Because among the wealthy, recovery is not a private process. It's a social event, a gift-based dialogue, an exchange of objects, gratitude, and veiled judgment. The physician arrives first. He's not empty-handed. He brings a book, hand-copied, wrapped in velvet, mostly unreadable, and vaguely about the virtues of cinnamon. You thank him, you offer. In return, a fine pen made from a stork's feather, tied with gold thread, smiles, confused but pleased. The exchange is complete. Next comes the apothecary. He presents a vial of something called soul tonic for mornings, made from petals that only bloom at dawn and possibly dissolved optimism. You give him a pouch of coins. Not too heavy, lest it suggests desperation, but not too light either. Recovery must feel proportional. Then your cousin visits. She brings sugared plums, wrapped in paper printed with tiny birds. You don't like plums, but you admire the wrapping, and give her a brooch shaped like a leaf, and say, "It reminds me of when I thought I might never see autumn again." She weeps. The exchange is successful. This is the rhythm of noble healing. You are now surrounded by a small mountain of symbolic presents. Pressed flowers, silk ribbons, devotional miniatures, jars of preserved cherries. Most of them are not useful. All of them are important. The gifts say, "I survived." They also say, "I noticed you noticed." And occasionally, "Please remember this when you are ill." You send thank you letters. You do not write them. Yourself. A scribe visits, sits by your chaise, and reads your fever poem aloud for inspiration before crafting each note in poetic script. You dictate from beneath a quilt that smells like lavender and diplomacy. Even your symptoms become gift-worthy. You offer a small carved walnut to the servant who held your hand during your most dramatic sweating. You send a crystal vial of rose oil to the neighbor who lent you her fan. You gift a small portrait of your recovering face to your aunt, who once fainted in your presence and called it sympathetic illness. Exchanges grow elaborate. One friend sends a lute. You respond with a scarf. Counters with a bowl of candied fennel. You retaliate with a poem written on silk. The gift war lasts a week. No one wins. Everyone wins. Eventually, someone gives you a lemon. It's been carved into the shape of a swan. You have no idea what to do with it. You weep from exhaustion. It is understood as gratitude. Your room is now cluttered with sentiment. You are still weak, but surrounded by offerings, tokens, and the faint scent of spiced pear, an obligation. And when you are finally well, truly well, you send one last gift to the physician, a mirror. so he can see the face of a survivor, or possibly just because you had a spare. Either way, it's the thought that heals. Asterisk. You forget someone's birthday? You spill wine on the guest. Cushion? You insult a bishop by yawning during his metaphor about olives. It's fine. You're unwell. That's the beauty of illness. When you're wealthy, it's not just a condition, it's a blanket excuse. A passport out of any engagement, obligation, or mild social catastrophe. You've said the wrong thing. It was the fever speaking. You missed a betrothal dinner? Your bile was unbalanced? You mistook someone's wife for their valet. You're still not fully yourself, and no one questions it. Because illness in the right silk robes becomes character. It makes you tragic, thoughtful, vaguely poetic. A walking cloud of frailty and perfume. You don't attend events, you haunt them. You're given a seat near the window, just in case your humors need sunlight. You're served broth, while others eat roast. You don't participate in conversation so much as glance meaningfully between teacups. Someone spills news of a duel. You sigh and say, "How tiring," everyone nods. You cancel meetings. You delay. Correspondence. You retreat mid-conversation with the phrase, "The dizziness returns." It doesn't. But no one challenges a noble spell of faintness your physician provides. Letters explaining your need for solitude, for shadowed rooms, for warmed syrup infused with wild thyme. You frame one. Even your household shifts. Servants. Walk quieter. Meals arrive with extra napkins and fewer onions. Visitors are warned not to startle the Constitution. Someone plays a lute in another room for your benefit. You pretend to hear it, you start to enjoy it. Your illness becomes a form of power, a soft veto, a velvet no. You raise one eyebrow, and 3 engagements vanish from your calendar. Cousin. Arrives unannounced. You resting faintly in another room. She leaves with a gift and no eye contact. Of course, this doesn't last forever. People eventually expect recovery. But recovery, when performed well, is a slow, artistic process. You re-emerge with a shawl, a new appreciation for light conversation, and a doctor's note that says you may walk no more than 7 steps without support. You choose your steps carefully. Illness forgives so much. You owe someone money? You were. Too weak to arrange payment, you forget a name. The fever muddled your memory. You promise to attend a wedding, then don't. A flare of spiritual instability at the 11th hour. You say something cutting? "My apologies," you whisper. "I'm still healing." They accept it, because to be rich and ill is to be both. Vulnerable and untouchable. You wrap yourself in it like a monogrammed blanket. You gaze into the middle distance. You cough once, just to be safe. A servant offers you a cushion shaped like a pear. You nod. Tomorrow, you may feel better. But tonight, you are gloriously frail, lightly tragic, deeply unbought. And if anyone asks why you missed the memorial for the Duke's second cousin, you smile faintly and say, "Ah, that was during my decline." They sigh. So brave. Asterisk. Your bed has become a minor celebrity. Not just a piece of furniture anymore. It's a destination. A shrine. A velvet-trapped exhibit in the grand theater of your recovery. Visitors speak of it in hushed tones. Have you seen her rest? It's the one with the embroidered canopy. I heard the mattress was blessed by a monk who once sneezed near a saint. You lie in it, of course. But it's hard to say whether you own the bed anymore, or whether the bed owns you. It started simply, you were ill. You needed rest. A soft place to collapse. But soft wasn't good enough. The mattress was restuffed with goose down. Then again, with something called air-warmed moss. Physicians suggested lavender-scented stuffing, so that was added too. The result is a sleeping surface somewhere between a pastry and a noble sigh. The bed frame was upgraded. It's carved oak, now painted with scenes of healing miracles and botanical allegories. The headboard features a reclining angel with a hot water bottle. The footboard has a drawer for your emergency sugared pears. The sheets, imported linen, washed in rose water. Pressed by someone who signs their work at night, the bed glows. Not literally, but emotionally. It reflects candlelight in the way only high thread count fabric can. It smells like serenity and seasonal affluence. Guests who see it develop spontaneous symptoms in hopes of being allowed to lie in it, even briefly. A visiting priest asked to touch the blanket. He left with improved knees. You're not sure when the shift happened when you stopped being the focus and the bed took center stage? You overheard someone say, "She's recovering beautifully, and the bed helps." You've also heard, "I came for the gossip, stayed for the drapery." It's both flattering and humiliating. Servants begin referring to the bed as her grace's sanctuary. They offer it warm stones, scented cushions, polite bowing. The bed receives more attention than your actual recovery. You suspect the bed is smug. Sometimes you cough just to remind people you're still in it. A painter arrives to capture your convalescence. He paints the bed. You appear somewhere under the third blanket layer, vaguely luminous. The painting is titled, "Rest in Soft Majesty." You are unnamed. You think about protesting. But then the physician fluffs the central pillow, the one with the embroidered moon, and you forget what indignation feels like. The bed is just that convincing. Even your dreams are better. You dream of polite applause, of being mistaken for a swan, of soup that serves itself. Eventually you do recover, mostly, but no one wants you to leave the bed. They insist you complete your healing arc. The bed agrees. You lie back. The blankets sigh with you. The window lets in just the right amount of admiring breeze, and when the bishop visits to bless your pillow, you don't even blink. You're used to it after all. You're just the patient. The bed is the real miracle. Asterisk, you're better. Not almost better. Not lingering in convalescence. Not glowing with poetic fragility. Just better. It's awkward. Because when you're wealthy, health doesn't just return, it ambushes you. Usually on a morning when you're still wearing your recovery robes and someone is warming your soup to the exact temperature of a duck's sigh. You stretch and nothing hurts. You sit up and no one rushes in with a fan. You cough politely and no one reacts. In fact, someone frowns, as if to say, "Are we still doing this?" The physician arrives. He squints, prods your pulse. He checks your tongue and consults a chart. Then he sighs and says, "You're restored." Try to look disappointed. Restored means no more velvet couch. No more broth presented like prophecy. No more lounging near windows while someone reads poetry at you like a bedtime wind. Your fever dreams are over. You're expected to function. The worst part? People are excited. They clap. They bring flowers. They say things like, "How wonderful." And "We've missed your energy." And now you can return to the correspondence. Pile, you want to faint, but your body refuses. Suddenly, expectations return like poorly trained geese. You're meant to walk without assistance. Talk without sighs. Attend events without veils. Cushion shaped like a pear is removed. You're told it was for recovery use only. Even your bed starts to feel less sacred. The blankets are washed with ordinary soap. The pillow loses its ceremonial ribbon. Someone places a candlestick on your side table as if the whole room is still emotionally healing. You ask for one more day of rest. Just one. The physician smiles kindly and says, "The body craves motion now." You suspect he means his body, which is already walking out the door with your last bottle of poetic elixir. You attend a gathering. People say, "You look strong." One adds, "I liked you paler." You smile through clenched health. The lute. Player no longer visits. No one brings broth. Your symptoms, your once beloved little ailments, are now seen as excuses. You say you feel tired. Someone replies, "So do we all." You mention a lingering chill. They hand you a shawl and move on. The room smells like candles and competence. You begin to long for the ache behind the eyes, the humors, the foggy afternoons, where your only task was to gaze. How you're expected to remember names, to sit upright, to eat solids, to re-enter the world. You manage. You smile. You answer questions about your health. You say, "Much better. Thank you." You pretend that this is what you wanted. But at night, you press your head to the pillow and whisper to no one in particular, "I miss the leeches." You fall asleep wishing for a slight fever, just enough to cancel next week. Asterisk, and now, the candles have burned low. You've walked through a world where your liver writes love letters, your spleen sulks in corners, and your kidneys are whispering secrets to the moon. You've tasted gold, been courted by leeches, and politely passed judgment on soup with your eyebrows alone. It's been a strange journey, one full of perfume, superstition, soft pillows, and organ betrayal. Thank you for staying with me until the end. It's always something rare to drift together through time like this. Gently, absurdly, curiously. Maybe tomorrow you'll feel a tickle in your chest and wonder whether it's your humor staging a coup. Or maybe you'll just remember that, in history, everything inside you was trying to escape. And now, as you lie there, you know the loop will wait once more for you.